Imagine a vast, sun-drenched savanna in the late Pleistocene, roughly 50,000 years ago. The air is thick with the scent of crushed grass and the distant metallic tang of an approaching storm. A herd of prehistoric horses grazes near a watering hole, their ears twitching at every rustle of the brush. Suddenly, a figure emerges from the heat haze. It isn't the explosive, muscled blur of a saber-toothed cat or the low, golden crawl of a lion. It's something small, relatively slow, and upright. It's a group of hairless apes walking at a steady, rhythmic pace. They aren't running. They aren't hiding. They are simply coming. To any other predator, this display would look like a death wish, but to the horses, this is the face of the apocalypse. This is the paradox of the human presence. We lack the talons of the eagle, the venom of the viper, and the sheer crushing power of the grizzly, yet every single one of those creatures would rather face a forest fire than a solitary hiker with a backpack. We are the ultimate anomaly in the natural world. But why would a creature designed for peak lethality be so utterly paralyzed by a species that spends most of its time sitting in climate-controlled rooms? The answer is carved into the very DNA of every living thing on this planet, a legacy of terror that we've been building for 2 million years. To understand this, we have to look at how animals perceive their world. Ecologists use a specific term for this: the landscape of fear. Think of it like a topographical map, but instead of mountains and valleys, it's made of safety and danger. A deer doesn't just see a meadow. It sees the place where I can eat, layered over the place where I might die. Their entire existence is a high-stakes game of risk management. They choose where to sleep, when to drink, and how to raise their young based on the invisible ghost of predation. For most of history, we weren't just a part of that map. We were the ones redrawing it. Our ancestors were persistence hunters. While a cheetah can outrun almost anything for 30 seconds, humans could follow a target for 30 miles. We used our sweat glands to dump heat while the prey's internal temperature climbed to lethal levels. We were the monster that never stopped walking. If you were a kudu or a bison and you saw a human on the horizon, you knew that even if you ran 5 miles, that human would eventually crest the hill behind you, still walking, still coming. That kind of relentless, inevitable pressure creates a trauma that spans generations. But is it possible that this fear has become something even more profound in the modern era? What happens when you take the apex predators of today, animals that fear nothing, and play them the sound of a human voice? This was the exact question asked by Dr. Liana Zanet and Dr. Justin Sarasi from the University of Western Ontario. In a landmark 2019 study conducted in South Africa's Kruger National Park, they set up a series of hidden speakers and cameras at watering holes. They wanted to see how the local wildlife reacted to various sounds: lions growling, dogs barking, and humans talking at a normal conversational volume. You might expect the sound of a lion, the king of the jungle, to be the ultimate deterrent. But the data told a different story. When the speakers played the sound of humans chatting about their day, the animals fled 40% faster than they did when they heard lions. Even the lions themselves, the top of the food chain, tucked their tails and vanished when they heard human voices. It wasn't just the prey that was terrified, it was the killers. The study labeled us a super predator, a title we've earned not through physical prowess, but through our terrifying efficiency. We are the only predator that kills across every habitat, at every time of day, using tools that strike from a distance. Does this mean that the king of the jungle is actually a title we've held in secret for millennia? Consider the problem of unpredictability. Most animals are masters of pattern recognition. They know that a wolf pack usually hunts at dawn or dusk. They know that a crocodile is a threat only near the water's edge. This predictability allows for a certain level of relaxation. If you know when and where the danger is, you can live your life in the gaps. Humans, however, break every rule of the animal kingdom. We hunt in the morning, at noon, and in the middle of the night. We use traps that kill when we aren't even present. We kill from hundreds of yards away with silent arrows or thunderous rifles. We kill for food, but we also kill for trophies, for protection, or sometimes by complete accident with our cars. From an animal's perspective, we are a chaotic variable that cannot be solved. We are the only predator that might leave a pile of delicious corn in a field one day and fire a high-powered projectile from a hidden stand the next. This lack of a hunting profile forces animals into a state of permanent hypervigilance. They can't afford to guess wrong because with humans, there are no patterns to rely on. But if we are so universally terrifying, why does a pigeon in London think your shoe is a great place to take a nap? This is the phenomenon of habituation, and it's one of the most complex software updates an animal brain can undergo. Habituation is the process by which an animal learns that a repeated stimulus, in this case humans, carries no actual threat. It's a biological cost-saving measure. Being terrified takes an enormous amount of energy. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles flood with cortisol, and you stop eating to focus on escape. If an animal lived in a city and fled every time it saw a person, it would starve to death in 3 hours. So their brains eventually downgrade us from lethal threat to background noise. This is especially evident in urban specialists like raccoons, rats, and crows. Dr. John Marsluff at the University of Washington took this a step further with his famous crow experiments. He found that crows don't just habituate to humans, they categorize us. He wore a specific dangerous mask while trapping and banding crows, and for years afterward, those crows and even their offspring who had never met him would dive bomb and scold anyone wearing that specific mask. They had developed a cultural memory of a specific human threat. They had learned to filter the background noise to find the one human who actually mattered. Could it be that some animals are actually studying us more closely than we are studying them? There is one place where the landscape of fear completely collapses, and it gives us a haunting look at what the world was like before we arrived. This is the concept of island tameness. When Charles Darwin stepped onto the Galapagos Islands in 1835, he was disturbed by the behavior of the local wildlife. He wrote in his journals about how he could walk up to a hawk and knock it off a branch with a stick. He saw iguanas that wouldn't move even when stepped on. These animals hadn't been tamed by humans. They simply had no evolutionary context for us. Because these islands had no large land predators, the animals had never installed the software for fear. This lack of fear is a death sentence in the modern world. The dodo is the most famous victim of this evolutionary blind spot. It wasn't stupid. It was just optimized for a world where nothing walked on two legs. When sailors arrived, the dodo didn't run because it didn't know what running was for. In just a few generations, a species that had survived for millions of years was erased because it couldn't learn to be afraid fast enough. This tells us that fear of humans isn't a factory setting for life on Earth. It's a hard-won survival trait that must be learned or inherited. If fear is an evolutionary necessity, what happens when it starts to rewrite the geography of the entire planet? We often think of human impact in terms of physical destruction, cutting down trees or paving over fields, but our most profound impact might be psychological. A massive 2018 study published in Science by Caitlin Gaynor analyzed 62 species across 6 continents and found something startling. Mammals are becoming significantly more nocturnal in response to human presence. Even in areas where humans aren't hunting, places like hiking trails or suburban parks, animals are shifting their activity to the dead of night just to avoid seeing us. We are literally forcing the animal kingdom into the shadows. This creates a temporal landscape of fear. A coyote that would naturally hunt during the day is now forced to hunt in the dark, which changes what it can catch, which in turn changes the population of rodents, which changes the types of plants that grow in the meadow. By simply being present, we are triggering a trophic cascade. We are like the wolves in Yellowstone, but on a global scale. We don't even have to pull a trigger to change the world. We just have to be seen. Is it possible that our presence has become a type of unintentional chemical warfare? This brings us to the most visceral reason animals flee, our scent. We tend to think of ourselves as relatively odorless compared to a wet dog or a skunk, but to the sensitive nostrils of a predator, we are a walking chemical disaster. We carry the scents of synthetic detergents, processed foods, plastics, and petroleum. But even if we stripped naked and scrubbed ourselves with river sand, we would still smell like a primate. Research has shown that human sweat contains specific fatty acids and volatile organic compounds that act as a primary deterrent for wildlife. In studies where scent strips were placed in the woods, human odor was found to be just as effective at repelling mountain lions as the scent of a rival predator. We are a biological warning sign. To a deer, the smell of a human isn't just something weird. It is the smell of a 2 million-year-old catastrophe. We are the only animal that smells like everything at once, a cocktail of artificial and biological signals that screams unpredictable to any nose within a mile. So if we are so terrifying, why do some animals choose to stand their ground and fight? Every year, we see headlines about bear attacks, shark bites, or bison gorings. These events reinforce the idea that nature is aggressive toward us. But if you look closer at the behavioral data, almost every attack is actually a failed escape. When a grizzly bear charges a hiker, it's usually because the hiker surprised the bear at close range, often near a food source or cubs. In that split second, the bear's landscape of fear is overwritten by its cornered response. It isn't hunting you, it's trying to clear a path to get away from you. The exception to this rule is the few species that haven't learned the human rule yet, like polar bears. Because polar bears live in one of the most isolated environments on Earth and have no natural predators, they haven't had the thousands of years of negative reinforcement required to fear a bipedal ape. To a polar bear, you aren't a super predator. You're just a very slow, very fatty seal that forgot how to swim. These encounters are rare reminders of what we were before we became the masters of the planet. But what if the very thing that makes us scary is also the only thing that can save these species? This is the ultimate irony of the landscape of fear. The animals that are the most afraid of us are often the hardest to protect. If a species of mountain gorilla or snow leopard is so traumatized by human presence that it flees at the first sign of a researcher, we can't track its population, we can't treat its diseases, and we can't protect it from poachers. Fear becomes a wall that prevents conservation. This is why respectful habituation has become a cornerstone of modern wildlife biology. By proving to these animals over decades that our presence is consistent and non-threatening, we can slowly dismantle the landscape of fear. We see this in places like the Virunga Mountains, where gorillas have learned to tolerate the presence of vets and rangers. They haven't become pets. They've simply updated their internal map to show that these specific humans aren't the monsters of their ancestors' stories. It's a fragile piece, one that can be shattered by a single gunshot, but it proves that the cycle of terror can be broken. What does it say about us that our greatest achievement as a species is becoming the thing that everything else hides from? We live in a world of ghosts. When you walk through a quiet forest and see nothing but a few squirrels and songbirds, you are witnessing the success of the human project. The large predators are gone or hiding. The megafauna are in the shadows. The peace we feel in nature is often just the silence of 100 species holding their breath until we leave. We are not just visitors in the woods. We are the primary architects of the behavior of every creature within them. The squirrel that has an existential crisis over your granola bar isn't being dramatic. It's honoring a tradition of survival that began before the first pyramid was ever built. It is reacting to the most dangerous thing that has ever lived. There's a specific kind of silence that happens in the deep woods right before a storm breaks. A heavy, expectant stillness where even the insects seem to stop buzzing. That is the feeling the animal kingdom has about us every single day. We are the storm that never quite ends. And while we might find comfort in the idea of a connection to nature, we have to acknowledge the reality. To most of the world, we aren't a friend, a brother, or even a rival. We are a variable that cannot be solved, a predator that doesn't follow the rules, and a scent that smells like the end of the world. If you've ever wondered why that deer looks at you with eyes the size of dinner plates, just remember that it isn't seeing a person. It's seeing the persistence hunter that followed its ancestors until they collapsed. It's hearing the super predator that makes lions run for cover. It's smelling a chemical signature that indicates a threat more unpredictable than any wolf or cat. The fear isn't a mistake. It's the most accurate piece of information that animal has. And as long as we continue to be the dominant force on this planet, that deer will continue to bolt. the birds will continue to explode from the trees, and the forest will continue to hold its breath. This brings us back to that squirrel on the lawn, the one currently twitching in a state of absolute panic because you decided to have a snack outside. It's easy to laugh at it. It looks ridiculous, frozen in mid-step, tail flicking, heart probably beating at 300 beats per minute. But that squirrel is the winner of a million-year-long game of elimination. Its ancestors were the ones who didn't wait to see if the hairless ape was friendly. They were the ones who didn't stick around to find out if the stick in the ape's hand was for leaning or for killing. They ran, and because they ran, they lived. We often talk about wanting to get back to nature, but the truth is that we never left it. We just reshaped it into a shape that suits us, and in doing so, we turned the entire world into a high-security prison for everything else. Every time you step off your porch, you are conducting a massive, involuntary experiment in behavioral ecology. You are testing the limits of habituation and reinforcing the landscape of fear. You are the apex of the apex. But there's a final, more haunting thought to consider as you finish that granola bar and head back to your car. The animals aren't just afraid of what we might do, they are afraid of what we already did. They are the survivors of a long, slow war that we've been winning for 50 millennia. When that deer stares at you before bolting, it isn't just seeing a hiker. It's looking at the most efficient, successful, and terrifying killer the Earth has ever produced. It's looking at you, and the fact that you find its fear cute or dramatic is perhaps the most frightening thing of all. Remember the Kruger study, the one where even the lions fled at the sound of a human voice. There was one detail in that data that often gets overlooked. The animals didn't just run from the sound of humans. They ran from the silence that followed the humans. Once we were gone, it took hours for the watering hole to return to normal. The fear lingered long after the sound vanished. It was a haunting proof that our presence leaves a psychological scar on the land that outlasts our physical footprints. We are the only animal that can haunt a place without even being there. Next time you're in the woods and everything goes suddenly, inexplicably quiet, don't look around for a bear or a mountain lion. Look at yourself. You are the reason the forest is holding its breath. You are the shadow that won't go away. And in the eyes of every creature watching from the brush, you are the most terrifying mystery they will ever have to solve. So, what do you think? Is it possible for us to ever truly coexist with a world that's been hardwired to flee from us? Or are we destined to be the ghosts in our own landscape of fear? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had an encounter where an animal seemed to see right through you? If you want to dive deeper into the hidden mechanics of the natural world, consider sticking around. There's a lot more to uncover in the places where we usually don't look. The forest is quiet now. The squirrel has finally reached the safety of the oak tree. The deer is a mile away, its heart rate slowly returning to a baseline. You're back in your car, the engine turning over, the granola bar wrapper tucked in the cup holder. To you, it was just a nice afternoon in the trees, but to everything else out there, the danger has finally passed. For now, but they know you'll be back. They know we always come back, and that knowledge is the only thing keeping them alive. The landscape of fear isn't just a theory, it's the world we've built, one footstep at a time. And as you drive away, the forest begins to breathe again, a long, slow exhale that will last exactly as long as it takes for the next human to crest the hill. The storm has passed, but the clouds never truly leave the horizon. That is the legacy of the super predator. That is the price of being human. And it's a price that every other living thing on this planet has been paying for 2 million years. There is a final proof of this, a detail so small it's easy to miss. When researchers in the 2016 study played those human voices, they noticed that the animals didn't just run, they stopped drinking. In the heat of the African savanna, with the sun beating down and their bodies screaming for hydration, the mere sound of a human conversation was enough to make them choose thirst over the risk of being near us. Think about that for a second. In the ultimate battle of biological needs, water versus safety, safety won. The fear of us was stronger than the drive for life itself. That isn't just an animal being skittish. That is a definitive, haunting proof of who we really are. We are the only creature on Earth that can make a thirsty lion decide that it's better to die of dehydration than to spend another second listening to us talk. That is the closing argument of the human story. We have become so terrifying that we have overwritten the most basic instincts of life. We are the silence at the watering hole. We are the shadow in the trees. And we are the only ones who don't have to be afraid.